Have you ever wondered if there's a hidden architecture to how the world is actually run? Well, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're taking a strictly documentary-style look at a highly structured, honestly fascinating Russian conceptual framework known as COBE, or the concept of public security. We're going to map out its incredibly complex worldview. But just to be crystal clear right up front, we're exploring this as a specific ideological theory, okay? We are absolutely not presenting this as established fact. It's really just a unique lens through which this specific framework views global history and modern society. Unpacking it, well, it's a fantastic exercise in understanding entirely different models of global management.
So, to break this all down, we're going to look at 5 main areas. 1. The global predictor. 2. The crowd elitism model. 3. Economic control mechanisms. 4. Biological population control. And 5. The path to sovereignty.
All right, let's start with part 1, the global predictor, the unseen architects of planetary governance. According to this framework, the world isn't actually run by the presidents and parliaments we see on the news every night. No. Instead, they want you to imagine an institute of unstructured conceptual power, an entity that has supposedly utilized a single unified doctrine to steer humanity for the last 4,000 years. They call this theoretical entity the global predictor. The idea is that they don't react to daily politics, they literally program future scenarios over centuries. So how do they allegedly pull this off? They use what's called a predictor-corrector scheme. In plain English, that translates to a highly advanced anticipate and adjust mechanism. Step 1, you forecast future environmental and social factors. Step 2, you implement conceptual goals to shape the outcome you want. And step 3, you proactively adjust the course long before any crises fully manifest. It's essentially like software programming, but applied to the entire span of human history. The core of this whole idea lies in what the framework calls the full function of management. Proponents argue that true, ultimate power lies entirely in the first 5 conceptual steps of management, things like setting goals, designing concepts, and identifying environmental factors. The global predictor supposedly controls these top layers. Meanwhile, the visible modern politicians we vote for, well, they're essentially left in the dark, trapped way down in step 6, just executing structures designed by external architects, completely unaware of the true overarching goals. Which brings us to part 2, the crowd elitism model, the pyramid of hierarchical exploitation. In this particular worldview, society is structured as a very rigid pyramid. At the very top, the elite hoard complete, holistic, conceptual knowledge of that full management cycle we just talked about. But down at the bottom, the massive crowd is deliberately fed highly fragmented, what they call kaleidoscopic information. The theory argues that by forcing the masses into extremely narrow, hyper-specialized roles, people are kept from zooming out and seeing the big picture of how they're actually being managed. But what happens when this pyramid structure gets pushed too far? Well, to understand their pretty dramatic view of history, we have to look at what they call equal energy exchange. This is a fundamental law of balance that they claim governs both physics and sociology, basically requiring a balanced give and take for literally any system to survive. The framework argues that the crowd elitism pyramid is essentially a social virus. It fundamentally violates this law of equal energy exchange because the elite just continuously extract energy and resources without giving an equivalent return. And here's the wild part. The theory claims that this exact mathematical imbalance is what ultimately caused the collapse of highly advanced past civilizations, places like Atlantis and the Maya. Basically, it mathematically guaranteed their self-destruction. Moving right along to part 3, economic control mechanisms, interest-bearing loans and taxation as tools of extraction. To explain modern inflation, the source material uses a really striking supervisual metaphor. It asks, do swing branches create the wind, or does the wind cause the branches to sway? Right here is where they completely flip mainstream economics on its head. You know, mainstream economists will tell you that high loan interest rates are a totally necessary tool to fight and control high inflation.
Well, the KO framework argues this is a deliberate illusion. They're saying economists are blaming the swaying branches. In this theory, interest-bearing loans are the wind. They are the direct cause and generator of inflation, acting as a massive vacuum to extract wealth right out of the public.
And the sources claim there's historical precedent to back this up. They argue that when interest rates were aggressively capped, like during a 100-year period in Russia starting back in 1795, or in the post-war USSR in 1947, natural productivity growth actually caused prices to steadily fall over time. Present-day high interest rates, they argue, simply violate that energy exchange by extracting trillions into the banking sector without producing any real value. They apply this exact same logic to taxation, too. They argue that systems like the value-added tax, or VAT, were designed by foreign entities to act as a tax on creation. The idea is that it effectively punishes domestic manufacturing and forces nations to become just raw material donors. Their proposed alternative? A non-added value tax, meaning a tax specifically on unrefined exports to actually stimulate internal domestic growth.
Now, for part 4, biological population control, the sixth priority of management.
In what is definitely one of its most striking claims, the framework asserts that alcohol and tobacco are utilized by the global predictor specifically as the sixth priority of control. Think about everyday habits for a second. In this framework, these are absolutely not viewed as mere bad habits or public health issues. Not at all. Instead, they are categorized as deliberate tools for population management. The claim is they're used to degrade the population's genetic potential, block the natural mind and its 60 billion neurons, and ultimately ensure the masses remain passive objects of management rather than active conceptual thinkers. They have a quote for this: "Sobriety is not a medical recommendation, but a basic requirement for managerial sovereignty." So absolute, uncompromising sobriety is framed here not as some personal health choice, but as the mandatory very first step to achieving true independence from external manipulation. If your mind is clouded, the theory argues, there's just no way you can grasp the conceptual levels of power.
Finally, we reach part 5, the path to sovereignty, managerial literacy and systemic reform.
The proposed antidote to that whole crowd elitism pyramid is a concept they call managerial literacy, or жизнеречный. This is defined as a total revival of holistic conceptual thinking. It's basically the ability to take all those fragmented, kaleidoscopic sciences and synthesize them back into a unified understanding of global management. By doing this, they say, everyday citizens can finally see the complete architecture of power. So, what is the actual sequence to achieve this true sovereignty? Well, the path requires citizens to first secure their biological autonomy through absolute sobriety. Next, they have to master those top 5 conceptual steps of management, meaning learning to set goals and understand the environment rather than just blindly executing orders. And only then can they successfully implement the economic reforms needed to restore the balance of energy exchange, like eliminating loan interest. According to the sources, Russia's mission within this specific framework is not to force a single new ideology across the globe. Rather, the ultimate goal is a global ecosystem of real diversity, a world where nations live by their own traditions and inspire others strictly through the power of example, modeling a fair, energy-balanced society without coercion. As we wrap up this explainer on the Cone framework, it leaves us with a really fascinating, provocative question to ponder. In a modern world entirely defined by highly fragmented and hyper-specialized information, have we lost the ability to see the true architecture of the systems that govern us? Are we just swaying branches? Or can we learn to see the wind?